Before jumping in, this video is available ad-free and in audio podcast form on locals.com for monthly subscribers. It's a platform to help diversify away from YouTube ad revenue exclusively and helps the channel immensely, so if you like the content, please consider subscribing for alternative formats and additional bonuses. Link down below in the description. Ubisoft is having a bit of a rough time lately. It seems like they are in the news constantly with various different issues. They have faced concerns of sexual misconduct from leadership, workplace abuse, developer crunch, and a whole bunch more. But today I want to focus on a previous statement that they made regarding political influence and highlight just how much of a lie that really was. The statement itself was fairly simple, and to be completely honest here, I commended them heavily for it at the time. Basically, Ubisoft expressed a position of political avoidance. The games were to be about player enjoyment exclusively and not about an overarching political narrative from the company being forced upon their player base. This makes sense on a surface level, and again, I highly commended their approach in the current politically saturated environment, but that statement was only skin deep, and is clearly not something they intend to honor. To understand exactly how all of this takes shape, we need to discuss the two separate kinds of political narratives in gaming, because in reality they are distinctly different. On the one hand, there are integrated political themes, and on the other, superficial ones. Integrated political themes are somewhat rare, but among those titles there is a greater depth in terms of narrative value. Some examples of integrated political themes would be the Metal Gear series or the BioShock franchise. BioShock Infinite, as an example, tackles the idea of American exceptionalism. It touches on racism and class warfare, among many other issues, but integrates these topics into a complete narrative which may not be perfect, far from it, but has cohesion and meaning. Another more prominent and more immediate example of integrated politics would be The Last of Us 2. Pre-release, I had concerns about the implementation of these clear political agendas, but ultimately the execution was rather uninteresting and uneventful. The real issues came from story pacing, motivation, forced player experience with an undesirable character, and a whole bunch of other issues ranging from shallow emotional manipulation to deliberate antagonism of a certain fan group. All in all, personally, I think the game was terrible, but not once in my 30-ish minute review or something like that was the focus on politics, because the game was built from the ground up around some of those themes, which is a reality of artistic creation that all of us just need to accept. It can be done badly, it can have a negative impact, it can be undesirable and even offensive, but developers and writers have every right to construct a story the way they see fit. And when that vision is built from the ground up around their cohesive vision, I will defend the conceptual process. But all of this changes when we get to superficial politics. Superficial politics are much more common in the industry. An easy example would be Mortal Kombat 11 and its inclusion of certain one-off lines or self-contained story arcs. For instance, Shao Kahn, one of the game's villain characters, uses the line, "Make Outworld great again," alluding to the current United States president and his campaign branding. Jax, another character, has a story arc where he ignores Raiden's many warnings about timeline manipulation and travels back in time to end slavery early with absolutely no temporal side effects, saying, "I'm not waiting years for people to get woke." The game unironically adds in political jabs and slights against certain ideologies and candidates in a way that has absolutely nothing to do with the overall story. In fact, going further, the sequence of time travel for Jax actually contradicts existing lore, and while minor, yes, completely minor, it is a poignant example of superficial politics that are skin deep, added only for the purpose of demeaning or insulting one demographic while pandering to another. Integrated and superficial politics are like night and day. One is a slight against the game and its fans, existing only to farm headlines from particular journalistic outlets and appeal to a crowd who will largely never be interested anyway, and the other is a narrative mechanic that can create engaging and highly entertaining worlds through relatable and thought-provoking dialogue. It can be done exceptionally well, mind you. Integrated politics might be something I often do disagree with, but ultimately they can be good. Superficial politics are almost always lazy, annoying, and bad. Now back to Ubisoft. My commendation of their decision to avoid politics was levied under the impression of their condemnation of superficial political agendas being included, but that statement also insinuates that they will avoid integrated politics. Integrated politics can make great games. Yes, they can, but they are not a cornerstone of all franchises, and it's entirely possible to make fantastic games that don't really delve into these controversial aspects of modern life. I was operating under the impression, as were many other people I believe, that Ubisoft was distancing themselves from all forms of political inclusion, which can be a mindset that honestly benefits true escapism. However, I was wrong, Ubisoft lied, and now we see one of the most blatant political titles in history from the publisher, which not only strikes a major nerve with large existing activist organizations, but also dives headfirst into the most controversial political arena in decades, like an Olympic swimmer or diver into the shallow end of a kiddie pool. The game is Tom Clancy Elite Squad, and the trailer is now playing in the background right now. For those listening to the audio podcast form, I will describe exactly what transpires. Effectively, the trailer showcases heightened civil unrest as a result of poverty and corruption, among other things. From that unrest, as the situation worsens, the trailer depicts a faceless organization named Umbra, setting aside the fact that Umbra quite literally translates to darkness or shadow. We'll come back to that. The trailer then uses imagery of a raised black fist. There are shots of news footage where fires rage in the background, and the organization is framed as taking advantage of civil unrest to garner popular support and project a goal of crafting some sort of egalitarian utopia, while being responsible for various atrocities behind the scenes and pushing crime through the streets. It even goes so far as to claim that Umbra hacks the social media accounts of world leaders to discredit them and rally support for their cause, which, coincidentally or intentionally, I'm not sure, lines up perfectly with the recent Twitter hack in which Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and ex-President Barack Obama had their Twitter accounts compromised to promote a Bitcoin hack, or if that was even the real goal. Eventually, after outlining what Umbra is and how it seeks to destroy the world, the trailer concludes by saying that world leaders have come together to authorize a special tactical squad, the Elite Squad, which is where the player comes in, as they hunt down Umbra and save the world. Hopefully people can connect the dots here. Umbra is very obviously a hybrid organization of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. The literal branding of BLM was used. The silhouette images are oddly reminiscent of existing shots from Minneapolis from months ago. The newsreels look nearly identical, and everything right down to the world state that lends itself to their shadowy formation, even their name, creates a direct comparison to Black Lives Matter. The game is effectively a kill squad going after the criminal activists plaguing the United States, and I do not for 1 second believe that this was an accident. Now, for clarity, the truth of the matter is that the United States is besieged by crime. The fears of an Umbra-esque agenda are very real for a lot of people, and what the media won't show you is that mobs chanting things like this have become common. Groups of violent criminals rampage through suburban neighborhoods, chanting "Death to America." Politicians call for the abolition of history classes, statues get torn down, crime is out of control, and this is a direct result, all of it, of activist behavior. The game is quite clearly an integrated political construct, and would, under that definition and logic, be something that I defend. However, and this is a very big however, Ubisoft does not get to say, we avoid politics because it is bad for business, and then make one of the most political games in decades without getting harshly called out for that. This isn't even the only example either. Watch Dogs Legion operates in a post-Brexit world, which might not be strictly speaking American politics and thus outside my immediate personal experience, but there is no possible dispute that such a setting and whatever decisions they make while tackling that included subject matter will be inherently political. Ubisoft is talking out the side of their mouth, or some other orifice entirely, because the statement that they will avoid politics only to then create a villain organization with actual branding from a highly political activist organization in the real world operating as we speak in the United States, that statement is nothing short of manipulative, and quite probably, owing to the severity and overt nature of these politics in the game, a flat-out lie. I might agree that the current activism is harmful in its present form, but when you say to your player base, we will avoid politics, and then pivot on a dime and produce this, also it's a mobile game, which I hate even more, I can't rightly stand by and pretend that this is suddenly praiseworthy just because the angle changed. On the flip side, it's rather hilarious to see the flailing of certain journalists and outlets. In the past, they championed the inclusion of politics with every breath. They advocated that all games are inherently political and the idea of escapism is naive. We should have more politics in games. But now, when those politics demonize something that they support, the inverse argument comes to light, like some bizarro Twilight Zone. This is political, get the politics out, they scream, but only now when they themselves and the ideology they support have been the target. Consistency is a hard thing to come by these days, but consistency on political themes is something that the industry desperately needs. Elite Squad is clearly an example of integrated politics, which, whether you agree or disagree, has every right to be respected. However, it comes from a company that claims to be somewhat apolitical, and who states that politics can be bad for business. From that company, no, not something I will respect or defend. Because even if I enjoy the squirming of certain activists and journalistic outlets, Ubisoft claimed one thing and then did the exact opposite not even a year later. And that deserves to be criticized. It's an odd situation right now. Companies like Activision Blizzard donating to Black Lives Matter adjacent groups and then platforming Yuri Bezmenov, a figure who condemns subterfuge, which is identical to what occurs now within their very own movement. Ubisoft openly donates directly to the organization, then constructed a mobile game which has casted them quite clearly as the antagonistic global villain. Why? I don't really know, but it's impossible to believe that these things are accidental or coincidental. Perhaps they are hedging their bets, playing both sides, or maybe they really are just flying by the seat of their pants. I'm not sure, but no matter what, I will not praise Ubisoft for stating, "We avoid politics," and then being more political than any other publisher in the entire industry. Just stick to your word. That's it though. If you want to support, there are links down below: merch, locals, social media, another YouTuber to support as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.